Welcome
Out of town.
to our planning commission meeting
Primaries are the
for,
week of the general.
what is today anyway? June 9th. We don't have a chair determination letter to read, which is great.
I don't have to keep track of them.
Nice. Well, let's get started with the Pledge of Allegiance. If you'd all stand and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Great, thank you. So for this evening, Commissioner Shagrud will be offering our thoughts, so we'll turn some time over to her.
All right, I'm going to read you a story. All right, water is the most limited natural resource, with 97% of it saltwater. Only 3% is freshwater. Of the 3%, 2.5% of it is unavailable because it's frozen as snow and ice and locked up in the atmosphere, the soil. It's polluted, or it lies too far under the Earth's surface to be extracted at a reasonable cost. That means only 0.5% of all the Earth's fresh water is easily accessible as surface waters in rivers, streams, and lakes. So, I'm going to encourage us to be good stewards of Utah's water by using it wisely and sharing information with others. So I'm going to share some information with you. Last year, Utah experienced one of the driest and hottest years on record, and we anticipate another tough drought year ahead. This is what Governor Spencer Cox said. He said state government is committed to doing its part to conserve water, and he encouraged all Utahns to use this most precious resource wisely and sparingly. Here are some facts. The statewide snowpack reached approximately 81% of normal and peaked 10 days early. Soil moisture reached, this is a tongue twister, soil moisture, reached exceptionally low levels not previously seen since soil moisture was monitored beginning in 2006. Low soil moisture has already adversely affected the spring runoff. The state's reservoir storage has decreased 14% over the past year. All forecasts for spring runoff for the state are below 76% of the state seasonal average. The United States Department of Agriculture currently has listed 28 primary and 1 contiguous county in Utah under the secretarial disaster designation for drought. These extreme drought conditions have adversely and significantly impacted agribusiness, livestock production, as well as wildlife and natural habitats. Increased recreation in dry vegetative conditions has contributed to an increased and prolonged threat of wildfire across the state. These drought conditions that require mitigation are expected to persist. Our population is projected to double, the population of Utah is projected to double by 2065. So stretching our water supply is critical. Conservation is key to ensuring we have water now and for future generations. So Spencer Cox, as you may have heard, issued his strong considerations for all state buildings, and he's requested cities and counties and residents to follow these best practices. He suggests water following conservewater.utah.gov weekly lawn watering schedule guide, which now is twice a week for northern Utah. Water before 10 a.m. and after 6:30 p.m. Look for new technology to update your irrigation system and use the WaterSense certified products where possible. Manually shut off systems during rain and wind events in areas without rain and wind sensors. Audit and repair all landscape irrigation systems so they are operating at maximum acceptable efficiency. Evaluate opportunities to limit turf areas surrounding facilities and replace turf with water-wise plants. Evaluate opportunities to replace inefficient plumbing fixtures with WaterSense certified low-flow fixtures. Look for opportunities to update facility management technology to include metering for water-consuming processes related to irrigation, domestic, and mechanical systems. Implement leak detection and repair programs for both indoor and outdoor water use. Water suppliers and irrigation companies should, where possible, delay the start of irrigation season or end the irrigation season early. Encourage efficient landscape watering, and as needed, contact the Division of Water Resources for assistance with developing a drought response plan. Cities and counties should consider developing and implementing water restriction plans for the upcoming irrigation season. Also consider implementing the same practices that are recommended for the state facilities at city and county buildings. Residential water users should consider the following with the suggestion outlined. Fix all irrigation inefficiencies, purchase and install a smart controller or a low-flow toilet. Rebates are offered at utahwatersavers.com. Reduce indoor water use by taking shorter showers, turning off water when not in use, and replacing appliances with water-efficient models. Follow direction of local water providers. Convert turf areas to water-wise landscapes. Be an advocate of water efficiency by setting an example and help educate friends and neighbors on the importance of water conservation. Reduce indoor water waste. This order is effective immediately and shall remain in effect until otherwise modified, amended, rescinded, or suspended. So I want to challenge all of you to save water wherever you can. Consider a change and see if you can make it happen.
Okay,
The
Thank
end.
you.
You're welcome.
well, that's good. It's very, very timely, very important. All right, let's move along then to the first item on our agenda for business to consider. We have a public hearing scheduled for a zoning code amendment for Park Strip hardscaping. And,
Nice timing here.
yeah, no kidding. And we'll turn the time over to staff. Lisa, maybe?
Yes.
Awesome.
Thank you. Yes, you have an ordinance before you tonight to consider and provide a recommendation to the city council regarding allowing hardscaping in the park strips. It's a little bit of an interesting approach because the city council has already adopted similar changes to our municipal code. So I put those in your packet. And as staff, we were thinking we probably should have had the planning commission weigh in on this, but the city council wanted it fast-tracked. And they went ahead and made those ordinance amendments, which now allow in the park strip. It used to be that you had to have landscaping in the park strip in most areas of the city unless the Public Works Department allowed something else. But it was sort of random and not very uniform. And so as staff, we've recommended taking out that discretion and just saying, you know what, if it's good for most people, let's just have a set objective standard. And so the city council approved, staff recommended just decorative rock between the sizes of 1.5 to 6 inches, just because that was determined that, you know, they'll stay where they are, but they're not too big to cause some problems. But the city council added in, when they were reviewing it, flagstone, pavers, and brick. So they did want some kind of flatscape in there just for safety in case somebody didn't want to do the rocks. So that was approved, and so basically we just had to go back in and make similar amendments to the zoning code that just refer to that. I tried to keep it simple. I didn't want to redo the entire, because most of the zoning code said you need to put landscaping in the park strip. And I just said, except as otherwise provided in Title 11, you better go look at that because it does allow hardscape. And I will say that the city council as staff, we talked about maybe starting with a certain area of the city for this hardscaping, like just residential. But as we talked about it, we actually think that it's best to encourage it on our west side. And, you know, where we have lesser landscaping standards, they only have to do 10% or others, and also commercial. I mean, we've seen a lot of commercial areas where they put in some really great xeriscape and hardscaping. So we actually recommended and the council approved these ordinance amendments to allow limited hardscaping in every area, every park strip of the city other than the parish gateway area. Because, you know, we have those nice 30-foot bermed landscape buffers. We wanted to keep that gateway into the city, but everywhere else, those limited options are there. And basically, they don't really even have to come to the city. Those are just permitted areas. So staff's recommending approval of these amendments to the zoning code, and I'm happy to go through those. They're quite limited. Like I said, I just refer to Title 11, which is the streets and public ways in our municipal code, and just reference that we can have some hardscaping. and also making it clear also in our zoning code that the abutting property owner to the park strip is required to maintain it. So this does require a public hearing, and we're also happy to answer any questions. But again, this, I think, as the commission mentioned as we were introducing this is a timely issue, particularly with the water conservation issues. And as you know, it's very hard to water the park strip without the water going everywhere else on the sidewalk and in the streets, so. But it's a balancing act. You know, we did have a committee of our storm drain utility operator, and he's concerned about, you know, bark and things getting into the storm drain and clogging our storm drain. Public Works is worried about the cost of now getting into our public utilities and how much is that gonna cost. And so that was one of the compromises too, was we're happy to allow flagstones and other things, but just don't have them cemented in, because then that's gonna increase the cost. So, yeah, with that, I'm happy to answer any questions.
So you kind of touched on the question that I had there, which was cost of removing it. Because in a lot of the park strips, that's where, you know, communications lines and other things run through there. Water meters are often in the park strips. So I guess the bottom line is that the expectation is that those utilities should be able to move whatever is there and then place it back. And
Yes, and there was some testimony from the city engineer that certain items are not as costly, like, I think he was even saying in some cases, the asphalt and concrete might not be as costly as we think to replace, because grass and all the sprinklers and, you know, other lines, sometimes that gets just as costly. So, but I think it was a good compromise not to do the firm hardscaping yet. Staff was recommending against the brick pavers, at least from the streets department and the public works, because they said those are impossible to get back in place, and that residents are probably going to be upset because it's never going to look perfect again when you put all that in. But that was, I think from the council's standpoint, they were concerned with safety as well, and also wanting people to be able to, you know, walk along the park strip area. And so that's why they added in the flat hardscaping rather than just decorative rock.
Do we address any types of plants, like Heidi had mentioned, drought-resistant plants as it relates to the park strips, or is this just addressing hardscape?
Well, as I tried to draft these amendments, I did put in that you can use hardscape and/or landscaping. So, because at first we said you can use landscaping or hardscaping, and then I thought, well, wait a minute, if people want to do, because we've seen lots of pictures, you know, our public works director went out and took pictures of hodgepodge that's out there, and yeah, so you can put both plants and landscaping, and so I don't know.
I'd love to hear Heidi's recommendations. She'd give us some excellent recommendations for some plants that would go well in a xeriscape park strip, but.
Yeah, but I think most, well, I guess in commercial, in the park strip, I don't know if they'd be covered by a landscape architect plan. When we were requiring public works approval, our code still had a certain green landscaping or, you know, plants in the park strip, but that is no longer required. If they just want to put hardscaping, totally they can. But that's, you know, I mean, that might be a good idea for a future project, is to talk about providing more guidance of, yeah, xeriscaping, you know, recommendations. But I know the water conservation companies and agencies also do a really good job with that. You can even go tour and get ideas.
Yeah.
So I have a question. Right here on this page that we're seeing, it says that your perimeter and internal landscaping has to have 75% coverage. Are we still saying that has to happen in the park strip?
No.
And so that's what the next paragraph talks about, is excluding the park strip from that requirement?
Yeah, sorry, my screen went dead. So which exact section are you looking at there?
B.
B, what page?
I don't know what page. 4?
So 1251, 070.
Oh, right at the beginning.
Yep, right at the beginning.
Oh, okay. Yes, so I'm just trying to exclude, so in the first paragraph I say,
Yeah.
except as otherwise provided in Title 11, you know, here's the requirements. But Title 11 says it can be that. And we could be more comprehensive, like if you want to just get rid of that, but I don't know. I think that this is an experiment, and so I didn't really want to go in with a really heavy red pen.
Yeah.
So-
Also, you mentioned bark and the concern for bark, but I didn't see anywhere in here where it said, well, I mean, I guess it says it right here, but why couldn't we just prohibit bark and wood chips from the park strip?
We do, and that's in Title 11. We specifically say no
Okay.
bark, you know.
It just gets in the storm drain and then it
Yeah,
clogs it up.
it flows out too much, and I think we even put synthetic, I don't know about you guys. I've
Those
been to
rubber
the-
ones?
I've been to Lowe's a lot, and yeah, now they have these new synthetic products, so
Yeah.
I just said, we don't want, you know, wood or synthetic product, bark type products, because they just float away and into the storm drain.
I have a question about the trees. So we have a tree board in our city, and I was noticing, I really appreciated that it said on here, history adopted by ordinance 2017-03 on 4/4/2017. So it tells the date of when that was adopted and everything. So I appreciated that. That made me think, we have a tree board, but it doesn't look like there has been any changes to any of our park strip tree locations and everything, and maintenance requirements and approved tree lists. Is that correct?
That's correct, but that's not to the fault of the tree board. They have been very, very busy. I'd like to give them credit. They have prepared an extensive document recommending changes to our street tree ordinances. Some of that has been reviewed in work sessions with the city council, but it sort of got tabled and put on the back burner. But we have been back in conversation with them to try and get those work sessions with the council going again. And so they would like to make some recommendations. Obviously, the staff committee's recommendation was, please, let's just tackle hardscaping in the park strip and not street trees in the park strip, because we wouldn't get this done. And so we're asking to just keep those things separate. I did highlight for staff the couple provisions regarding street trees, and I think we all agree that that's next on the table. And, you know, I've even talked to the chair of the tree board, and, you know, he's been working on those, and, you know, some recommendations may come back, like, you know, if it's only a 4-foot park strip, then maybe we shouldn't have a street tree, but, you know, or specific kinds of trees. So I think we'll see that in the next, I don't know, 6 months, 6 to 12 months. Hopefully we'll see some changes, but those are going to take a lot more effort and committee work, I think, to get those passed. But I think we're ready to tackle it. I know that it's been a high priority for the tree board, and they put a lot of work into it.
I know that the tree board has worked hard. I just since I hadn't seen any changes on it, that's why I kind of wanted to bring that up. So.
Yes, and they are starting to put they've asked me about putting things on the website and things like that, and I said you can put them as recommendations, but they haven't been adopted, so.
Okay.
And I do want to thank you for highlighting, I did put that in the actual ordinance, I just cut and pasted out of municipal code, but all of in our online code, there's the legislative history for every section of our municipal or zoning code, and it'll say when it was adopted, all of the zoning code was readopted in 2016, but any amendment will be there, and then you can just click on that hyperlink and actually go right to the ordinance.
Sweet.
And we save our ordinance, I think we've been doing it for 4 years or so, all red line. So you can actually just pull up the ordinance and you'll see the exact red lines that were adopted.
Cool. Thank you.
Thanks for highlighting that.
That's good. Anybody else have any more questions for staff about this one?
Well, our apologies for not bringing it to you first, but hopefully you're on board with these
I
changes.
have one thought.
Okay, go
I
ahead.
think depending on how complicated a resident gets with their hardscape, and if the city does have to come in and tear that up, it might be difficult to put that puzzle piece back together. I just know from one only isolated
Like
experience.
if it's a herringbone set or something like that, is that what you're talking about,
Right,
Heidi?
like if they go into detail with their puzzle that's in the hardscape, it might be hard to duplicate that, and then you might have someone very angry.
So that's why I think in the ordinance that was adopted, it says loosely laid bricks, pavers, and/or
Yeah.
flagstones. So the idea is to tell residents, it better be loose. 'cause-
And with the knowledge that the park strip isn't their property.
Right.
We all think it's our property as citizens, because we mow it, we water it, we edge it, we take care of it, but it's really not ours. It's just our responsibility. That's why we think it's ours.
Yeah.
Yeah, and we did add some provisions into Title 11 highlighting that a major use of the park strip is for utilities.
Yeah.
And trying to highlight to residents, please, yeah,
Because to
be
your
careful,
point,
'cause-
Kevin, it's not just data, it's water, it's natural gas typically goes there. Most of all of our utilities run in the park strip outside of sewer. Am I right, staff? Is that correct? Yeah.
Maybe there's probably some variations, but yeah.
I know that people brought up the parade route when we talked about encouraging their escaping and different things like that. Have we thought about that, how to address that with concerns of the public, or?
I mean, if this is allowed on Main Street or other things,
Well, if it's on Main Street, is there a way to encourage, like, maybe more of the flatter pavers or something instead of like the chunky rocks that people won't be able to sit on and enjoy the parade?
well, I think if you drive Main Street, those are already there.
Okay.
It is, I don't think that we've enforced our park strip ordinance seriously. And yeah, if you drive along Main Street, there's very large boulders, there's, that Matt's Place that they put in all xeriscaping with a lot of rocks, and there's concrete, there's asphalt, there's weeds. But
No, those are at Chili's.
I do think that the city council.
Those are Iggy's.
Oh, boy.
Iggy's is,
That'll go away.
I know.
Talking about our gateway. That's,
yeah,
Like flat today.
All right, so,
get us back on top.
Sorry about that.
yeah, let's get back on topic here. But, yeah, I think that, it seems to me like there's been a lot of thought about handling different things. And I think I don't know. I like to throw this out there every once in a while. Maybe this is newsletter type material. Say, hey, citizens, remember, park strip's your responsibility, but you don't own it. And keep in mind that if we dig it up, here's the only things we're gonna fix. I don't know,
Yeah,
whatever.
That's a great idea.
A nice way to say that, obviously way better than what I just did, but,
Well, and I think we do want to get if these pass, to get the information out there so
Sure.
people can take advantage of it.
Because I personally, we were talking about it as a family, we're gonna do xeriscape in our park strip. But Heidi probably knows the number, but there's billions of gallons that we can save as a community by just not having park strips, let alone the rest of our ones.
they just can't be watered very efficiently. And
Correct.
so you
Yeah,
just
it's not
waste
oversprayed.
so much
Yeah.
water.
Yeah, so,
Well, and I thought of this, even my side of my house, when you were speaking, that's really angled, and that one might not need stuff too, so there's lots of ways we can think about it.
great. So this matter has been scheduled for a public hearing, and we will take the opportunity to open the public hearing, invite anybody to speak if they'd like to. Seeing nobody rushing forward, we'll go ahead and close the public hearing. Any other comments, questions, thoughts, concerns, discussion?
My only comment would be, I'd really like us to work towards updating our park strip trees. I know that they can be water suckers sometimes, so I'm not in the vein of trying to make a ton of trees that's gonna take a ton of water, but I do think there are some major benefits to having trees in our city, and I really wanna make sure that we don't forget that as we approve this, that we keep moving forward for trees.
And also the suggestion of discussing this in an upcoming newsletter.
Yeah.
For the sake of kind of the administrative side of these things, Lisa, are we recommending adoption of the ordinance? Is that what we are making a motion to do?
Yes, adoption of ordinance 2021-14.
Then, well, I'll make a motion that we recommend to the city council adoption of ordinance 2021-14 as described in the staff report.
Second.
Thanks. So it has been, we've got a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Then we will start with Commissioner Kerr.
Aye.
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 Great. The motion passes. Okay, let's move on to the next item on our agenda, which is a discussion about planning commission goals, or planning goals discussion. And we'll turn the time over to Corey.
Thank you, Chair Daly and members of the commission. It's very weird. Hey, standing in front of you.
Great.
We love it. I almost didn't know what to do to come up to City Hall. I'm so used to just putting all the screens out and tying everything in. I was like, do I need to bring anything? No. Kind of odd, but it's good to be here. Just kind of giving you a little bit of introduction and then really allowing you to have your discussion. Getting a little bit of feedback, I can tell. There has been a want and desire for the Planning Commission in particular to meet with the City Council and discuss some goals. There's been a few brief discussions with the City Council about that, and they've talked about meeting with the Planning Commission. They did kind of delay things, and we're thinking tentatively into the July period because they're busy adopting their budget and handling some matters that way. And so we have talked with the mayor and city manager about that, and the mayor's willing to, again, engage with the council to work with the commission on some goals. So what I did, I sat back and in my memo to you, I provided your previous goals, and then I went through some other goals that have been mentioned in the past, and then some things with the recent legislation in the last couple of years that needed to take place, and a little bit of the ordinances that probably need some adjustments. What's interesting is if you go to the zoning code, one of the things that can be an often temptation about a zoning code is to try to perfect it. And you realize over time, there are a number of problems that are occurring in our zoning code. And I could just take you through 10 or 15 that I struggle with in the zoning code, trying to figure out what the language is meaning. And so there's a default process into the zoning code. The first one is the zoning code acknowledges that it cannot cover all situations. And so it allows zoning administrator, which I function as for the city, to have some discretion about interpreting the code. But if I do interpret the code at a request, it also ends up appealable to the Board of Adjustment for their, so it's not an unfettered, do whatever I think ought to take place. The other part of the zoning code does allow the commission to weigh in if there are some regular issues associated with interpretation. The planning commission can establish that procedure, and then the zoning administrator simply implements that procedure. So I wrote down some things that I think that need to be fixed, more on a closer to the major side of needing to be fixed rather than all of the perfecting of the ordinance. And I also put that in my memo to you. The memorandum will outline some major projects as I define them. These are things that either budgeted in the city council, or they're projects that may have a substantial amount of expectation of public process and input to it, like general planning, zoning, map amendments, or something of that nature. What's interesting is in the tentative budget, the council's adopted, and they still have to go through their truth and taxation process, which will happen in August. Then they can actually adopt the official budget. There is a line item sitting in two different places. One is in my budget with the Community Development Department, and there's also some money put into the RDA budget to update our general plan. We have done a relatively good job in fixing the elements of the general plan to be in compliance with state law that has been adjusted. The major examples that's easy to understand is the moderate income housing. That's been refurbished a few times as legislation has gone through. The neighborhood plans, if you know, we went to the southwest with the old Dick's Market. See, this is the old Dick's Market, but it's the old new place, Dick's Market. The old Dick's Place Market, we addressed that need with the closure of that store. But there are some other edits that probably ought to take place in the neighborhood plans. But from my perspective in talking with the council, I don't think we're going to holistically go into the neighborhoods and re-envision what's going to happen in those neighborhoods. We have some fairly strong established neighborhoods. The one element that I do put at the list is our northwest neighborhood. There's still a expectation in the northwest neighborhood that we look at semi-rural areas, and semi-rural areas are defined as 5 acres or more. I think from the time of the 85 plan, when that shows up in policy, there's been a lot of changes to that neighborhood, and so I'm not sure that the semi-rural necessarily has the same synergy. It might, but it has just not been truth-checked with the public over a number of years. So I did add that to your list that I put in the memorandum. There are those that are semi, they could be kind of major projects if you look at them, but at the same time, prioritization is an issue. So I just tried to put a rating of simplistic, that this is a priority, these are semi-priorities, these are low priorities. It doesn't mean that a low priority is going to be put off for 50 years. I think what I expect to advise you with as you discuss this is to prioritize a balance of doing some things that are a little more administrative fixes, and even though they might be a lower priority, put them in there because you can't accomplish all of the major projects in one fell swoop. So we can do a major project, couple it with a couple of administrative projects and accomplish that. So my last advice to you in this discussion is we are in election season. And I don't know if I have enough experience in election seasons because I haven't run for elected office, but I certainly have felt the pressures that happen along with the planning department during an election year. These become targets. Projects of planning are an easy target for people to tackle onto, position themselves on, and can lead to a divisive discussion that happens. So I envision that some of the projects that involve an intensive participation with the public are not likely going to fall high on priority of the council till after the election. And we've had some of that discussion. So I think an overhaul of the general plan amendment is probably not a summer of 2021 project. It's probably after the first of the year type project. And so that's, again, back to that balance. There's some administrative things that we can be very productive on and get accomplished fairly quickly. The ADU ordinance for accessory dwelling units. There are some things that we have to decide by October 1st if we're going to implement it. If not, it defaults to another term. I've got that scheduled at your next meeting to start looking at that draft. So I think some of those administrative things we can do along the way. But I still think you should, if there's an important major project, let's put it on the higher priority of other projects. And then I'll report back to the city council kind of what I hear from the commission and what I reflect from your conversations. And then hopefully we can go from there with the council.
Corey, so you list staff rating, which is helpful.
It's just
But regardless of an election year, if you as a staff had your ideal scenario, maybe it'd be helpful for us as a commission to know, hey, this would be high priority, but high priority 1, 2, 3, 4 in our opinion, and you could bring it to us. Fellow commissioners, would that be helpful? Or we could tell Corey what we think is important too, but it'd be nice to hear what staff has to say.
I think that's a good feedback. I mean, there are just planning ideas and concepts that should be above and beyond the political level that are in the best interest of the future. And so I would be happy after this discussion if you kind of give me your feedback. I would take your feedback. I would then redo my quick shot in the dark rating and identify some important things from just a planning perspective solely outside of what the moment reaction might be.
Because some of these things are being forced upon us by the state,
Correct.
correct? Like the moderate income housing as well as the ADUs, correct? So
And then I could
that's
just-
kind of like, hey, sorry, we
Yeah,
got
then
to
I
address this
could-
regardless of.
I think that's a good suggestion, and I could put that in a memorandum as a report from the commission and staff input for the work session, so both entities can see. Because you're right, the ADU, we have to make a certain decision by October 1st on how much of our residential area we're going to allow as ADUs. And we have not had that discussion, and I would not want that to wait till after the first of the year and find out, oh, we did want to use that. So I think you make a good point.
Yeah, I think my thought there is certainly the items that the state is forcing our hand on, we probably should discuss, so the ADUs, probably even the food trucks, to talk about those ones as well. And then whatever we need to do with moderate income housing, and figure out what we could lump in with the general plan type of thing. But certainly the things that we're being forced to deal with, right? So.
I missed the food truck ordinance.
Yeah, the food trucks as well. Other than that, given that it is an election year, and certainly, Main Street is always a lightning rod, regardless of what the discussion is with Main Street. Maybe, as much as I'd love to say, let's do Main Street, this year's probably not the year to do Main Street, right? But maybe there's some other things. My thought, as I read through this list as well, was to try and hit some of those things that we could, for example, the residential development outside of platted subdivision.
I like that one.
If we can simplify that process, push that one towards staff, love it. Let's do stuff like that. So, anyway, any other thoughts?
Stuff and the required stuff.
The easy stuff, the stuff that makes our life easier in the planning
Yes.
commission, but also the applicants, the citizens of the city,
Right.
make their life easier so they don't have to come get held up by us, potentially, just get held up by staff.
Corey, how often do general plan updates generally, how often should they happen?
Give you- Okay. That's the $1 million question. Let me give you a theoretical.
In the last 5 years.
General plans in a textbook environment is about a 20-year, 15 to 20-year horizon that you adopt a general plan for. You should be looking at every 5 years, about how, check that every 5 years, because as much as we make all these planning things into the future, I see the redistribution of housing right now, given what we've learned from the pandemic and where society has moved. We didn't see that in 2004. So, we're running, what are we at, a long time. So you should do a check at 5 years to see how things are going so that you kind of get a gauge. And then there should be a significant effort at the 10-year mark to reset that general plan without necessarily recreating it.
Like as a swag, Corey, how many new units, whether it's single-family or multifamily units, have been added to the city since our last general plan? It would
Right.
be
Exactly.
a pretty
Probably a
large
lot,
amount,
yeah.
wouldn't it?
Oh, yeah, you're
And the
gonna
last
be,
time
you're gonna be
was-
400 to 500 just alone.
Yeah, so in terms of our percentage population, that would tell us, hey, it's probably a wise thing to look at.
Yeah, so, we are a small community. There are anchoring things to a small community. It changes sometimes a little bit slower than a metropolitan area. And those are all, that's not an insult to one or the other. They're things that stabilize the community. They're things that synergize the community, and you're trying to create those balances between them. But we have gone a long time in our fundamental element sections. We Band-Aid fix those to be in compliance with things from time to time. Modern income housing is a really good example where we just did a rewrite of the entire element because there were significant expectations in 2002, 2012, and now we've got, some additional things that are being tied from the moderate income housing to economics and transportation that is fairly recent with that. And because that is kind of a state legislature push, we've done really good job trying to keep up to date. But if we look at our residential section, just the generalized residential section, there are policies in there from back in, I think, '88 that I think are just outdated and we shouldn't be looking at it. But then we have problem fixes like our residential section. You have low density 1 to 4, medium density 5 to 8, high density from 9 to 12, and that's always controversial. You know, what's a city's high density versus another city's high density? But we've now relegated residential medium to 6 units an acre, not up to the 8 units an acre. And so in the general plan, we're missing something in there now because we've updated ordinances to the legislative side and the immediacy of the temperature of the community, but our general plan's now out of sync of it. And so the issue is, should we make up somewhere that sync and refix that? Should we rediscuss what the densities are, rediscuss what our housing expectations, really study what our housing is? Because the moderate income housing tells us to measure each 5 years how many we have of the townhomes and single family and the apartment units. And our moderate income says we should go closer to a market rate. Doesn't say you have to achieve a market rate, but we should check it and look at it. And when we're looking at 73% of the Centerville as single family homes and 60% is the market rate, it's out of sync. But we're out of sync for a small community. We have more multifamily than the market rate. So, and then, you know, those are market-driven kind of elements. Where can density be placed? And I think the west side is a significant game changer that came in with the theater. The theater was the carrot for the city from an economic standpoint, but it came, good or bad, at a cost of what happened on the rest of the property. And they originally just wanted to do townhomes. There was going to be nothing else but a theater and townhomes under the original plan. And so we spent a significant time outside of the guidance of the West Centerville Neighborhood Plan that was outdated, trying to solve the carrot of the economic, and the rest of it should be just housing, and was that the best interest of the city? And, you know, I've heard the good, the bad, and the ugly on.
I have a question about the general plan, and I'm wondering if updating the general plan could address some of these other items you have on the list.
Well, I do mention the moderate income housing ties
Right,
into
but
it.
like,
The
couldn't,
CUP.
yeah, couldn't the general plan also take into consideration like a number of these other ones that like listed underneath it?
Subdivision ordinance
Well,
would be
those are
different.
ordinances, though.
Yeah,
But like maybe like the desire for, I don't know, maybe, I don't understand. But
I think in the end it does, because
Yeah.
in the theoretical textbook, your ordinances are the implementation tool
Of the
of
general
your
plan.
vision.
Right.
Right,
And so you're right in the broad sense of, if they're out of sync, how do we fix it so some of the things are
and don't you
are
have to
back into
start
sync?
with the general plan
And
and
generally-
adopt a general plan and then implement it?
Yes, and
And-
you have ways, the general plan, then you can have some strategics or master plans, there's a lot of things, and then you have your ordinances that implement those
Right.
kind of things. And I think you're right, I just don't know project-specific.
Yeah, I
What's-
just
what
know
general plans
from
can
my
do.
experience, if it says it in the general plan, if it says it in the master, you know, whatever, then it's also just as you can enforce it as easily as you can an ordinance. If you don't have an ordinance that specifically outlines something mentioned in the general plan or the master plan, you can still enforce it because it's in the general plan or the master plan.
Right, and what Centerville does uniquely is the general plans can be adopted by resolution or by ordinance. And we have chosen to adopt our general plan by ordinance, and I give a little bit of chuckle because that's the issue of, well, what if things don't line into the stars between the general plan and the zoning ordinance? Now what do you do? But we've always, in our site plan, if you'll see, there's always usually, we might mess up from time to time, or if it's important, there's usually a little paragraph that says, what does the general plan say? In our staff reports, and oftentimes not a whole lot. but at times it's important to think
Sometimes
about that.
I think general plans take a long time to do. Like, would you then send out an RFP and find a company to come do it? It isn't something you guys would do in-house, or is it something you would do in-house?
That's a great question, and that's still being debated. It depends on how the community looks at it.
Because I was going to ask that same question that Heidi just asked. Do we hire in third-party consultants that work with staff as kind of like a second pair of eyes peer review? Or, because if we're allocating $80,000 to that, what does that go to? My assumption is that there would be some kind of a third-party consultant, but
Right.
is that not the case, or is there?
It's a mixed bag, and I think it's a mixed bag in general principle, and it's a mixed bag for Centerville City. One of the things that I think is advantageous, well, I'll go through the pros of an outside consultant, and I think the answer in short is yes, we're going to probably seek some outside help because we have the administration process going along, and we need some assistance and some expertise in certain, elements or experience or help. So yes, I do think we'll be seeking some outside consultation process. The danger of it could be, and I'll give you two examples in Centerville, when you just simply rely on a consultant process. The Walmart site in the old Village Town Center project of the 90s, late 90s, and the controversy associated with that was a outside consultant with Reeves and Reeves is the engineering and Calthorpe Associates out of, I think their office out of Washington came in. And it was a wonderful plan from a planner standpoint. And there were a number of individuals, including the planner themselves, that hung their hat on how much money that was spent and the expertise in that. And there were city council members that were very much in favor of that and helped redo some of the writing to check it against what they thought the vision of the community is. And it ran an election. And the election was separated only by 90 votes. And I can give you Layton City on their West Side plan that ran a referendum, associated with planning. And they were great plans from a planning perspective. It just missed the temperature of the community and the tolerance of the community at the time. And sometimes that's hard to guess what it's going to be. And we ended up with something completely different. Another one is the South Main Street plan. We hired a consultant. We put $30,000 into that plan. That was a limited amount of money for a consultant to come in even at that time to do. And there's a tendency to borrow things from other communities of what should be done. And planners do this too. You'll hire a planner and they'll just come in and start repeating what they've done in other communities, because if it worked there and it seems great and everybody loved it, why reinvent the wheel? But that's missing that element of where's the temperature into the community. So consultants are great for expertise, but sometimes miss the mark with the community. And if you don't have a good, solid, I wouldn't call it ultimate vision, but if you have a good, solid direction of what you're trying to accomplish, what you believe your community is about, and you leave it up to consultant, they're going to cut and paste from a lot of different places and try to see if they can figure out what you might want. And the South Main Street plan is a good example of where they did cut and paste from some other things, thinking that this is what you wanted. And ultimately, we showed that it became divisive.
So I have two follow-up questions. Would you not have public open house meetings to try to gather the temperature of the residents here with your consultant group to try to guide a direction?
You do, and that's the danger and the positive of charrettes. The example that the criticism of the South Main Street is all the visuals were places that had already been done and repeated, and the people that attended said, those are great, pretty pictures.
Well, and they had
But
a
it didn't
committee.
reflect what the other part of the community, when they found out what those pictures meant.
How much did they have the public really there? I know there were committees, like a committee that represented the public, but how many open houses were there, attended and everything? Because it could be also a slightly different approach, just making.
There
sure
is. Foothills Management Plan, we had subcommittees and ran about 8 months of process. The West Side Plan, we ran about 4 to 5 months with committees. The shortcoming of the South Main Street Plan is because of the amount of money, the expectation, they had 3 nights, business owners, resident owners, and open during the week. Then Saturday, everybody, this committee got together, took all the surveying, everything out, came up with a plan, then went back up to the public in one open house, and that's all done in a 2-week period.
I don't think that's enough time.
Yeah,
My other concern is this, Corey, if you don't hire a consultant firm, then that's a huge responsibility for staff, and then you're overwhelmed and overworked because this is on top of all your other regular things you have to
Yeah.
do.
and that's partly true. I mean, I'd like to say, all the help I can get and feed off of that, but you pay me a decent salary, so I need to be working a little bit for my money out of that. But I'll give you the selfish side of it. If the planner is in charge, the city planner is in charge, and it becomes divisive, then it's hanging from the rafters at some point in time after an election. And so there's a way sometimes that the expert can soften that blow, because the idea of the planner working for the city is if the planner's out of control, then the way to solve that is just fire them.
Yep.
And so that's why I give you a mixed bag, and I do think it'll be a mix of things. I like to get my hands dirty, so I like to write ordinances, I like to write policy. My favorite part of planning, for me personally, most rewarding, is that part. I'd rather write ordinances, figure out what people are thinking, try to put a vision together, because the favorite thing for me is it's a canvas and a paintbrush. I don't like just borrowing from other communities and throwing it in. But I'm not an expert at all the subjects either, so I have to look at Lisa and say, Lisa, where am I going sour in this? So I think it'll be a mixed part. I think there's some things that I need to stay involved with, and we can save some money from the consultant if we can come together of what we're trying to accomplish, because this is really right now being funded as a part general plan update and a part RDA. And so we're going to be looking at some economic planning, some market analysis of where we are into the community and coupling that together. So we'll probably do more of like going out to consultants to get this, this, and this. And then we'll use committees and others to assimilate that back into a greater vision. And that's what I honestly see. Because $80,000 is in my budget, $20,000 is in the RDA budget. We're throwing that number out of $100,000, which is a lot of money. But I know that a general plan update can cost you $110,000 to $120,000
Well,
if you go to an outside consultant.
I like the idea of using an outside consultant if you can speed up the process a little bit, but, I mean, 2 weeks is a little too quick, right? Like you were talking about, that's a little too quick. But, obviously, the longer the process goes, the greater the risk is that something else comes along and bumps it and it just never gets done. So, if we can speed it up, make it reasonable, I like the idea of doing it that way.
And I like the subcommittee. I don't know what the actual implementation is to get community feedback. You'd love everybody to come to an open house, but it takes time and it requires people's schedules to align with those open house nights. So if you had neighborhood subcommittees where you had people volunteer and then they report back to staff and say, hey, this is what our neighborhood thinks, then you get a little pulse, like you said,
Yeah.
Corey. You get your personality of your.
I think you're right. An open house is great, but statistically, if you just do a generalized open house, if you hit 1% of what you sent out for notice, you are doing great.
Yeah.
What
Not gonna hit
what about
1%.
like online surveys or
Online surveys are a
seem
place,
to be really popular right now?
but in the temperature of Centerville, they've been a place of criticism about surveying.
But if you had a survey that said, hey, if your general plan has pictures, or, hey, we're thinking of these things, and they can provide feedback,
Yeah, when I was part of
Qualtrics or
Involve
something can
Ogden,
help us.
and we did it took a year and a half to do that entire project, that was way too long, but we did go out to the schools, and we had neighborhood meetings at the schools, and had charrettes inside those schools to get feedback, and tried to go to different parts of the community. And I think we would probably, in the general plan update, stay to something like that, rather than the 2-week, and what do you think, throw the dart.
But I mean, if you have a statistically valid survey, it's hard to argue that.
It is, but I'll take the example of West Centerville Neighborhood Plan. The West Centerville Neighborhood Plan ended up ultimately shut down. We did We did a joint program with West Bountiful in that, and got a grant from WFRC, Wasatch Front Regional Council, a planning grant for that. And they had all the data that justified how that development would work. Increase in jobs, increase in taxes. But when West Bountiful found out what was happening to that west side, and was kind of driven to trying to be politically correct, South Main Street had just recovered from the South Davis study and the Main Street plan and the idea that light rail might come into Centerville and stop as an option. And that was not well accepted by the temperature of the community. So the idea is, well, maybe we can do a front runner stop. Maybe we can lobby UTA, do a front runner stop. That way we permanently, in our minds, remove the option for light rail. Well, to incentivize the opportunity for a station stop, which needed a double track line and electrified, which back when we did that was still like, we're not sure we're going to do that. Now they're talking about funding a double track in a line. So, but when they found out what it came to justify that, to sell it, to make the economic return, the data was there. West Bountiful's eyes, because they were sharing part on the committee, the council member, when the light bulb went on, I knew when it went on, about 2/3 into the project, the light bulb went on in that council member. They came out in droves. And other than one or two people at the public hearing when it reached the council level, all of them were from West Bountiful. And West Bountiful, the council chose at that time, look, if it really offends our neighbors, this is a bad idea. And so it was a different experience. The data was there. I don't want to pick on Layton, but the data was there. But it hit
Well,
the wrong chord.
And sometimes we get public opinion, I mean, with Old Dix, we got plenty of opinion saying one thing, and we just didn't have the money for it as a city, so everyone wanted a park, everyone wanted a big old park, and that everyone wanted something beautiful, and of course, that'd be great, but sometimes that also is not feasible for the city as well, so.
But I hope I'm not a Daniel Downer. We can get through these controversial planning projects, and this is the challenge of planning. This is the fun and the misery of doing the planning. So I give you the cautions so that you have the background, but you're right. We need to couple with data. We need to couple with ideas that are relevant. But again, from my perspective, and this is where I think planning still is a liberal arts program, because we've relied on law. Sorry, Lisa, others. We rely on lawyers, we rely on data, we rely on the growth projections, and those all are absolutely important. I'm not cutting them down. But in the end, a value of a community is strong within the reaction. And if they feel threatened and feared and misunderstood by that, they're not going to take it. If it changes their way of life until they're open in their minds for change, it won't change. And this is the liberal arts of planning. We can have all the data, we can have all the justification, but if it's something that strikes that place, that moral value that comes from them about whatever that's stemming from, because we have, that's why politics and religion are so not terrible, it's the wrong word, so controversial, that until a person has explored and ready for open to consider that information, you can't change their minds. And I think that's what the art of planning is can you use the data, can you use the discussion, can you use the dialogue, can you use the win-win negotiations to bring a greater openness in the discussion? And man, that's hard.
I like that perspective, Corey, and that kind of helps me sort of, originally when we were talking about maybe some of these smaller, minor planning projects could be addressed through the general plan update. I think what you just said kind of has, and I've been thinking about this, maybe we do tackle, these subdivision, or these accessory dwelling, conditional use, subdivision, maybe these food truck things. And yeah, maybe it's sort of backwards to do the ordinance and then go into the general plan. But then what that does is that could really give us that temperature. I mean, obviously these are driven, a lot of them, by state mandate, but we could get that temperature of what's happening in the city that can kind of bring us to where maybe the general plan would have some guidance from some of these ordinances that have been recently revamped and looked at.
Yep, you can reverse engineer it slightly, yeah, yeah.
So, back to the main point here, talking about our planning commission goals, planning. In a way, I guess, if we talk about doing things that we are essentially told we need to do, either by the state or something, I mean, the general plan, I guess, if the city council is gonna give us, or set aside $80,000, then essentially the city council's telling us, do this, right? Because why else would they spend $80,000 on it? So, maybe that's another, maybe that one's a contingent goal, pending the approval of that $80,000, right? So,
And if they really truly want it, if they're saying $80,000, then they need to know that that means that we go after something that maybe is kind of a big deal, like the general plan. Because we did spend some time working on some things for them, and then ultimately, they said, oh, actually, we don't want that. So I do think it's important that when we present these goals, we say to them, okay, if you are line iteming this much money, that means you're telling us, we got to just spell it out for them so they understand, how that looks.
yeah, sure. So, anybody else have any strong feelings about what we want our goals to be? I mean, we can tell the city council, we're gonna try and make it so that it's not a divisive, explosive election year, right? Do these other things, but
Some may want that.
some might want that. But we also want to get things done. So if we do the things that we're told we have to do and the things that make life easier for people, let's do that.
So should we talk through specifically what y'all think is great?
So.
Give more direction to Corey?
Well, I'll lead out on that one. South corridor, just leave it alone. That's an easy one, low hanging
agree.
fruit.
To leave alone?
Just leave it alone.
Oh, yeah.
I especially appreciated that the priority was undetermined. Very diplomatic.
That is.
Listen, I'll be honest, I wish we could just get that one done, but yeah, this is not the,
Hence my comment.
Well, and if you're
We're not
already doing
sure
general
that we
plan and a
want
whole
to
bunch
do
of other
that.
things that are higher priorities, just, yeah.
yeah.
We're going to leave that as is. Everyone feel good about that?
Yeah. So I think for sure, the ADUs, the food trucks, and, wait, what was the other one I was missing?
The outside of platted subdivision that you had talked about.
Residential development.
May I ask a-
Yeah, that one and the moderate income housing element update, right?
Just want to ask a quick question, Corey and Lisa, and, everybody. How much of these 14 or 15 could we foreseeably do?
Yeah.
Like, we don't want to select 7 when 3 are really what we ought to be considering.
Especially with other agenda items that will
Yeah.
come up throughout the year.
Yeah, and I know that it would change if we pick like the little ones. There could be 7 of those, but could you give us a sense of what do you think really makes sense?
Well, I think several of them, I think there's 5 to 6 of them that reasonably could be done and accomplished even by the end of the year. Here's my experience, though. It seems like at certain points as we get along the way, something comes in and creates the controversy, and then it strings itself out for a long time. And so, for an example, that's an easy one for me. The residential single, that needs to be fixed. It's difficult for the landowners going through it.
Yeah.
I have my thoughts on where it should land, how it should land, and to me, I think it's like done. It's done so fast that we could do one meeting and go away. But then, what did I miss that I wasn't seeing that raises it to controversy? And I'm gun shy because South Main Street is one that we have tried to look at and revamp, and that's not as easy. It's apples and oranges, but I'm gun shy because as a planner, the undetermined is my way of saying, I don't know what anybody wants me to do anymore. I'm lost.
Yeah.
But I think that's why you need an updated general plan. Because if you don't have a general plan guiding your ship, then how do you know where you're going?
Well, I have a general plan that guides that particular
It's
ship, but
so well
apparently it's not the right ship, or it's it's a power boat versus a trawler. I don't know which one it
Look,
is.
we talked about, there were some things when I first joined commission where we talked about, streamlining some administrative processes and making sure that maybe, I think there was that chart that talked about like what it takes for someone to do something, and we went through, I feel like residential development outside of platted subdivision is similarly, like you said, I don't know that that's, it could be very controversial, we can see, but I think that's a great goal to put down and expect that that's not gonna take too long.
CUP ordinance,
The
I think, is
CUP,
something
same
that can be
thing.
fairly fast.
The parking ordinance, we're really close.
Parking ordinance,
feel
I
like
think that's fairly, easy to go
That's
along.
something we can put on for sure.
Integrating moderate income housing deeply in with the economic transportation can be a little bit risky.
I do think ADUs are, and even though it's legislated, I think we're gonna have a problem with, it's gonna end up being a little bit of a snag for some.
Well, but I think with that one, I think that one will be a little bit easier because the state's already told us.
Yeah, we're under state mandate.
The state's already told us, here's what's gonna happen if you do nothing.
Right.
So we already know
You and I
what-
understand that. That's true.
Right, but I mean, yeah.
And
I just think that's gonna be, as easy as it sounds.
Yeah.
That may be something that could cause some,
But on our level, we're making a recommendation to the council. So for us,
right, but for an election year, making recommendation to the council does mean some things.
but I don't think that means we tiptoe.
I don't think so
We
either.
Well, I think that
proceed-
goes
I'm
back
just
to your
saying,
statement,
I'm-
Corey, what can be done?
All I'm
Yeah.
saying is
Yeah.
that one may take longer, is all I'm saying.
It may, but maybe it takes longer for the city council, not for us.
Yeah.
Yeah.
If I could add in, I just, first of all, want to thank you for the question. Staff doesn't usually get questions of, what's your workload, what's realistic, so thank you for that. But I think for me, in my perspective, it's nice, I think you just need to prioritize what you really want to get done, big things. Because if it's your number one priority, then make it a number one priority, and we will too. But in terms of, if you are getting feedback from staff, I like having, one big project, a couple medium projects, and 3 easy projects. Because then we can be bringing you things, because I think what's happening is we get too many really big projects, and then you work on it and work on it, work on it, and then it stops, and then we pick up another really big project. So my preference in terms of goals, and I've learned this from the planning commission, is look at, write your goals down, look at them often, and talk about where we are with them. And that's where, I apologize on the subdivision ordinance, that's been on our list for a long time, and we did hire a consultant, and we got really far, but, at this point, it has to be completely updated, because there's been some major statutory amendments, and so, again, just in all realistic workload, it's not gonna happen in terms of my workload on that subdivision ordinance as much as I'd love to pull it back up. But anyway, I'd say put them in what order, but if you can also give us little ones to work on, because we can get those done and back to you, in a 2-week time, it's not that hard.
Yeah.
Corey,
So then-
remind us when the allocation, it doesn't become tentative anymore with the city council on the general plan.
It's a meeting in August, it's about mid-August, isn't it? Where they
So it's almost like we
adopt the
can't
final
make the
budget?
decision on the general plan until they actually implement
Yeah.
that. So for the next few months, we may say, hey, we're not going to talk about the general plan as a priority quite yet until we actually know that the city council has.
Well, I
allocated.
think what the purpose of today is what are your priorities?
And also, if it is a priority of ours, even though it may
Let them
not be.
know.
Yeah, we're gonna have a work session with them, and we're gonna say, this is a priority of ours, and they'll say, yes, that's a good priority, or no, that's not.
Because I will say, it's been in the budget before, and then at the last minute, it gets cut. So if it is your priority, put it on there and let them
Yeah.
know. I think staff is certain, I've given them that feedback. I think that updating the general plan is a huge priority for me, just from a legal standpoint.
So then along those lines, maybe our big project would be the general plan,
Coupled with moderate income because they go together.
coupled with, and I think you would also potentially couple it with some of the neighborhood plan updates and the foothill plan updates, because those are gonna go together. That's a big plan, a big project.
Well, if you put the foothills in there, that is also a lightning rod.
Sure.
I mean, I've wanted to tackle that
But you're
just to
gonna
make
tackle
sure
as
that.
part of the general plan is what Kevin's saying.
Yeah, I'm saying, when we talk about the general plan's gonna
Right, you're gonna talk about everything.
pick that up.
So can I ask a question? Sorry.
Yeah.
If we do the general plan, do you think we'll get the subdivision ordinance done?
Well, and now I feel bad, I said, you know, I mean, if you say the subdivision ordinance is a goal,
Let's
I
get
can,
close, right?
But because this is coming from having been in the trenches, I know how hard this
Yeah.
is. If we do the general plan, we're absorbing 50, 60, 70% of the bandwidth for what we could possibly do with this, if not more.
Yeah.
That's a huge lift.
and I don't know when, I mean, I don't think the general plan is gonna be tackled. I mean, they might put the money in the budget,
This
but
is-
but calendar year versus fiscal year,
And that
Yeah.
was gonna be my corollary. Is this really the year for the general plan?
Well, doesn't it take a
Like-
long time to do?
It takes a long time,
Even
so
once
we're
you
gonna s-
allocate it, then you gotta do an RFP,
Right.
you gotta procure a
So
consultant.
why don't we
they've
at least
done their
communicate to the
work.
council, hey, this is a top priority
yeah.
for us. Let us know how it's gonna go, shake out with you guys.
And the last time we were talking about this in the budget, it was, we're gonna go out in the spring for those RFPs. So, and that's probably a similar timeframe. I mean, even if it gets in the budget in August, we still have a ballot proposition on a cemetery issue that's gonna take time. But I think in terms of staff load, if you're hiring a consultant and doing the general plan, that actually doesn't take a lot of my time. So, yeah, Corey and the consultants and the public can be doing general plan, and I can be doing the subdivision.
Sure.
So,
And then my last question, sorry. Would you rather have the general plan first before we go back and revisit the subdivision plan?
to me, they're both priorities,
Okay.
you know, for different reasons. Yeah, I think that the subdivision is so, the ordinance is so close, and it's just frustrating, and sort of, I think we just need to adopt it, but there's a lot of work after we adopt it, getting all the new forms, all the new checklists, you know, staff retrained, so it has been something that, you know, but I'm happy to bring it back up, if that, it should be a priority.
Okay.
Okay, so here's what I would,
Talk.
Oh. yeah, so,
You're welcome.
See, it's not easy, you change your tune.
both favorites, by the way, in case you're wondering. So as the big project would be the general plan. Now, we might not even get to that this year, but we can communicate that, right? That's something that we'd like to do, and I think that's certainly what we're supposed to be doing as planning commissioners, is looking at that type of stuff. Medium might be the subdivision ordinance, right? Because we're so close, we're almost there, we just gotta have to push it over the finish line, maybe. Also, medium would be the ADUs.
I want that. I like that. I want to tackle that. Anybody else want to tackle that?
Yes, I do.
I'd like to tackle.
But I'm thinking about sizing these things. And then,
And that's a minor.
yeah, it's under the minor planning projects, but
What do you think?
Yeah.
Becky's concerned about.
No, I could be wrong.
So along the same lines, so maybe a small medium would be the food truck ordinance, because who knows, maybe we end up having similar types of concerns with that one too, right? People just talk about it. Small, I would put down, the parking ordinance update, because we're almost there. We're just about done with that one, right?
Yeah.
Let's just put it on the list and say we're gonna get it done. And then also small is that residential development outside of platted subdivision. So that's, one big one.
What about the CUP? Did you say that one?
I did not say that one.
I don't think we've said anything about that.
Just like Corey work is.
But that one, so we're not necessarily being held to do something on that one by the state.
That's true.
There's just kind of this general feel that,
Let's put that one on hold then.
I agree.
Yeah, I think that should be backburnered.
So then one big one, 2 mediums and 3 smalls.
That's
How's
what you
that?
asked for, right?
That's what she ordered. You got what you ordered. It's perfect.
Man, we're good.
That's the
After
other
a
thing,
lengthy
the other thing,
discussion.
and the other thing that might be
It only
important
took us,
to
45
discuss is, as we know, maybe the general plan is like, yes, we want to do this, And even if we want to do this, we still have, it's June, so let's get going on some other things, right?
Sure.
So maybe we can also go through,
We'll be able to fast track some of the minor
Yeah.
things.
Yeah.
go through and get some of those other ones done. I also, it's not on here, but I bring it up every so often, and it kind of is related to some of these things, you guys may just not really care too much, but I have always wanted to, we talked about meeting with the Trails Committee about the trails, and we've kind of talked about that with Foothills Management Plan a little bit, and we've talked about the complete, like finishing some of the trails so they are complete throughout the city, because we have a lot of really good trail systems, but sometimes there's just like tiny little holes of like where they connect. I know the Trails Committee is working on that already, like that's their prerogative, but I think it would be cool as a city planning commission who cares, to show that we care about trails, the trail system, especially with this past year, people, have gotten out and have been using our trails. It's a big part of, quality of life in Centerville. I always think it's a priority for me to discuss trails, but I don't know if anyone else feels that way.
Well, why don't we,
Did we talk about that a few months ago, or were we gonna have?
That's
did we
when I
put
brought it
another-
up.
Well, we had another committee that was gonna come just give us a minor presentation.
well, we did meet with the Trails Committee, but we did have,
No, we had.
we had the
It
tree
was the
board.
Tree board.
So I
that's who
asked
we
us,
had.
so then I said, also,
do something
should we
like that,
also
similar with
have,
the
yeah,
trails
that's what I was encouraging, but
But we did meet with the Trails Committee once upon a time. They
a
came in. they
long
came
time
in.
ago.
Years ago?
Yes.
Yeah, so that's a long time ago.
So I just think trails are priority for me, and I think a well-planned community has accessible, usable, connected trails system. And so I think it could be nice to encourage regular meetings with the Trails Committee, or at least have them more than every 2 years, and make sure that that's something that we are discussing.
Well, why don't we support the Trails Committee in their efforts on trails in the city?
Can we just have them come in and do a?
I guess yeah.
It's
we
not
could-
really like a goal necessarily. I feel like the goal is kind of wrapped into a lot of things, and I want to support them, but I do think the doing nothing is, I don't like that.
I see it as similar to what Lisa's doing on her, Ludman training. It probably would be not nearly as often, but our other committees that we have, just to come in and, because I've only been on the commission a year, Heidi's new. Christine, how long have you been in? So we haven't had any, obviously COVID, but some kind of regular committee come in, hey, here's the latest update, here are our concerns, here's the things that are going well.
Yes, that is.
Just give them 5 or 10 minutes. I think
Well,
that
and I
would be.
think
That is something I've suggested a couple times, so if we can actually make that a goal, can we put it into writing? Is anyone interested in putting that into writing?
To have.
As a goal.
To have like whatever
Regular
the committee chair
committee.
come in and talk to us, or?
Well, you can
Maybe
almost
every
schedule
other
it out annually, where you just have, or every quarter you have a committee, and
Yeah,
then
I think that'd be
we
good.
can do that on Novus and just contact them. I mean, are you just saying once a year that? the
I'm
committee
saying like
can-
every other month, how many committees? We have trails, parks,
Historic.
Tree board,
tree,
Whitaker.
historic, landmarks, are the,
They're separate.
they're separate?
Yeah.
Historic and landmarks.
You have quite a few committees.
So look, we could do,
Some of which even work.
we could do.
Sorry, this is one who's on a committee that's defunct.
So we could do every other month. If we just had a committee, if,
The chair, okay.
is that okay if
Or maybe,
We
we
invite
put
the-
that as a plan, as a priority that we want to?
I would support that. I mean, I think it just, if nothing else, to educate ourselves so we know what's going on.
I think it's a great idea
It's
to,
like you have misgivings. Can you,
No, I think, no.
Because he's
once-
been on this commission with me long enough to hear me say that.
Well, okay, but here's the thing. I think that if we can limit it to,
what am I missing as a new man?
no, if,
Commissioner,
I would
get
say, if we
what I'm
can,
saying.
if we can limit it to, have that chair come in and give us 15, 20 minutes rundown of how we can help them specifically.
I would say that's too long. I would say 5 to 10.
Okay, 5 to 10,
Yeah,
that's fine.
10 to 15.
So if we, and be specific about how we can help them or what we need to know specifically about our role, and not just to sit and listen to whatever, right? Let's be very clear about what we're trying to accomplish with this, then I think that's fine. But I think that if we were to go every other month, have a get-together work session like we've done in the past, I think that's too much. I think that's,
Yeah, I think that would swamp.
We had a work session with the landmarks because we specifically had something we wanted to address with them for the South Main Street corridor. So that was a very useful
okay.
time. I'm not expecting us to do that for every time, but I think that when there are specific times, if we specifically want to have them help us address an issue, for sure, we could open it up to a work session
Sure.
if needed.
If
But
there's- yeah.
if we just plan on having a committee come at least every other month and giving us, like you said, how, priorities for them, how we can adopt their needs into our planning priorities, and, you know, I think
Or
the
just
tree.
provide a general update.
The tree thing, when we met with them, was helpful because it helped us to consider what trees and things we're doing.
Corey?
It's a hybrid. I think we can make it a goal. But staff is very cognizant about in making the invites, but I also heard the comment, which I kind of agree with. We've got some committees that struggle, and taking their time and meeting frequently, I think, is something that probably would not happen, but maybe on an annual basis rather than regularly. I think the idea of a chair coming in, making an invitation out each time during the quarter to all of the chairs and saying, is there anything, or you want some time with the commission to share what you might be doing or what they can help you with? Because my perception, and I don't mean this insulting, but it's going to come across maybe a little bit that way. The time you met with the Trails Committee was the time of the controversy of the bike course up in the foothills. And what I saw was a huge lobby effort to get the commission to tell the council to support that. Wow. It was a reading between the lines kind of meeting.
Do we have a problem with the committee recommending,
Yeah.
having us recommend to the city
No,
council?
it was, that's fine with the bike trail, the issue with the bike trail, but we lost the community pathways part of the element that's where you really can truly go. So when we have connections through development projects, you know, is it in our general plan? Have we set a policy on, are we acquiring easements? Are we not acquiring easements to make those connections? That's where I think the production would be from the planning commission. They simply, and it's okay that they lobbied you, I'm not saying it's a bad thing, that's why I said I don't want it to be offensive, but it didn't result because it frustrated the elected officials that the lobby groups were going around in their mind in a very narrow way, trying to put political pressure on them when they had larger issues that they wanted to do. And so it got lost with the Trails Committee over a singular project. It's okay to discuss a project, but it got lost, and so there was nothing really the Planning Commission could help them out. And so I think we could meet on an annual basis, you know, invite them, and if they'd like to do that.
Do these I mean, some of the council members
Are
serve on
liaisons
some
too.
of the committees, right?
Yeah, they're liaisons.
So that's how they
Every-
generally get their information?
Yeah, generally. So I think you being informed, helping them out, I think quarterly, we could send out an invite, so it's on the goal that for all of the committee chairs to have an opportunity to talk with you and see if there are ways that they can help out, or what projects that we can working on, so that we can come back and say, hey, we really need to do this ordinance or modify this in the general plan to accomplish the goal. So
Yeah, because if the historic committee doesn't even respond to you, then,
right now, we don't have a landmarks commission.
well, that's, I guess my point is, they're not gonna be on an agenda if they don't.
So-
Right.
Well, I think it's maybe an annual sit-down with them and invite them on a quarterly basis to the chairs.
I think that's a good medium ground.
Yeah, I can do that. I can support that. That sounds good.
What about, I also have appreciated in our agendas having the delineation between administrative and legislative, just so that the public understands that. So can we just make sure that
Yeah, we've kind of lost it.
continues?
That's kind of fallen off, hasn't it? Let's, yeah,
Is that okay?
put that back.
I think that's smart.
I took that back to Layton and implemented it. It was really helpful.
I think it's super helpful.
Yeah.
Yeah,
think
I
it's
mean,
good.
that was helpful. I mean, Shaylin made that point when we went through the Hive. It was, this is a terrible situation, this is awful, we don't want anybody displaced from their homes, but the ordinance and the zoning is what it is, and
This is a legislative.
we're
or this is a
working within a
administrative
framework,
decision.
yeah.
Okay. That was a good, long discussion about goals. So, let's move along now to the bylaws review, and we'll turn this time over.
Thank you. So I just made the edits that you recommended last time, particularly in the meeting agenda section, changing the community development director shall review the agenda with the commission chair to may review. Adding in the consideration of agenda items, just fleshing out B, C, and G so that it more accurately reflects what happens in meetings, that it's more of a give and take than just present, don't speak again. And I think those were all of your recommended changes, so if that is okay, or if you caught something else. This has to be approved by the city council, so this is kind of we recommend it to the city council, and they can put their stamp on it or not.
Okay, so let me ask you that then. Is this something that we need to recommend adoption of like we just did with the park strip thing? Do we need to notice this for a public hearing, or is this just now something that we say, okay, city council, please?
As far as I understand it, it's just saying how will the planning commission operate. It's not being put into ordinance. This doesn't trump any ordinances.
Yeah, I think that's correct. There's no statutory requirement for how this is adopted. So I think at the planning commission, I think you can just by motion recommend these to the city council for adoption, and then at the city council, we actually adopt them by resolution.
Okay.
So do we need to make a recommendation for approval tonight with
So
seconds?
we
and
can
so
do that tonight then. Yeah,
forth? Okay.
okay. So unless anybody has any concerns with this, then anybody want to make a motion?
I'll make a motion to accept the bylaws as recommended and changed,
I'll
or
sec-
updated,
And recommend approval to this.
and recommend approval to city council. Thanks, Ken.
I'll second that.
Perfect. Okay, any other discussion about that? Okay. So let's start down at the other end with Commissioner Shagrud.
Aye.
Aye.
Aye?
Aye.
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 Great.
Bing, bang, boom.
What's that?
This is good.
Yeah, it's a little different in person, isn't it? I know, I forget. I'm like, oh, hey.
Very quickly.
Also, I like going last, but whatever. Okay, let's move along now to the Community Development Director's report and City Council report. Corey?
We just have a couple of items. It should be there's so many legacies, I don't know which legacy is
I
which
know.
legacy.
Trying to figure this out.
But this is the legacy projects on the south side of the megaplex. They're coming back in with an application because they're making some changes to the recommendations you made that went to the council that they adopted, and now they've changed their minds. So we're going back
Because they
to
were going to some,
office and retail.
yeah, they were kind of changing
And the
things up.
Yeah, they're
previously.
eliminating the office, and
That
so
was
it
that one, right?
reconfigures their site plan, which reconfigures their development agreement, so we're just
Shared park.
looping back through with it.
I'm going to say, this one feels like deja vu.
Yeah, it will be very much of that. We'll just have to check off the check marks to make sure that it qualifies what they're doing.
They'll still be going for, I assume their parking will be that shared parking arrangement thing.
Yeah, in theory, it should reduce the demand a little bit, but I'll check
I mean,
in the documents. And then we'll present the first draft of the ADU ordinance to the commission. It's not intended for a hearing. This is intended as your hat now to create the tools of an ordinance. So I've drafted a draft, take it through you. You get to shred it and redline it, and I have to tape it back together.
Look at you knocking out our goals right away, right after we just talked about that.
Yeah. I just know that we need to make a critical decision. I don't think it probably is as critical as we think, the state law says in my mind, but I need to make sure that we don't fall behind that process. And so we'll get the initial draft for you, take the time in a meeting or two to understand it, refine it to where you think it's at, what makes you comfortable. I'll be honest with you, I am just comparing to state law, but at the same time, I'm trying to do my favorite thing, tailor it and figure out the temperature of the community and how we really want to manage ADUs in the relationship of what the state
I was
starts.
going to say, you better be taking the temperature of the community.
Corey, on the ADU, and this may be something you address, but I remember when I built my home, by deed, I had to sign a document that said, I'm not gonna, so you may have to address, are you going to go, like, I guess it would only come up from a title perspective on transfer of property when somebody would want to get that removed from title. Would you just handle that selectively as people want to come in and title companies want to clean up title? Or is that I mean, that's a legal question a little bit.
Yeah, we'll look at it.
Lisa.
I have a fairly robust section on the state code that says we can license and the requirements of owner occupancy. I'm running that robust section through Lisa.
Okay.
'Cause
I just
But I
thought
mean,
of
if you
that,
have
thinking,
private restrictions on your own deed, the city ordinances are not gonna probably address that.
that's
You're
what
gonna
I
have to
thought.
deal
I
with
would just
that.
have, but many people would have been in my same
Yeah, that's
situation.
interesting. Because you have a second kitchen, or?
Yeah, downstairs. And so there's no exit out of it. And I think that may have been the issue, is you couldn't build at the time for some reason.
Yeah, you're right.
couldn't
Centerville
build a-
has a second kitchen requirement that if you build a second kitchen within a dwelling, record a document that it's a kitchen for the single-family use and not for,
Correct. So I think.
Also, it was a city requirement, not your title company.
no, it was a
That's correct.
city.
And so what I'm saying is if I go to sell my property or any other person in Centerville who had to sign a similar document, will we address that there? Or again, maybe that's a private issue that I deal with at
No, if it's the.
closing and then we would have to work with the city to do
I wonder if that's just been preempted already.
No,
I just don't know.
Yeah, but I probably, if it was a city, I'm familiar with the form that we require people to sign to get a second kitchen, and so we'll probably want to clean that up.
Yeah.
That's a good point.
No, it's a real point, so. But yeah, those are the kind of things that you're looking for is your.
Now it's a
this-
medium project.
I tell ya, I mean, I'm just saying, the ADU thing.
Nobody would
big
think
and
about it,
taking
no, I
longer
guess,
than we
Lisa,
think.
what I'm saying, nobody would think about it until they went to closing, it shows up on title, and a lender who, for the buyer's side would say, well, what's this? Or the owners would, the purchasing entity would say, what's this?
Yeah,
And they'd
that's
have to
good.
clean that up, so.
Good point.
Nope, those are the hidden gems, if you call them, that come and either make you rich or make you poor.
I've been working through too many
That's why we
title
have-
issues lately.
6 or 7 diverse commissioners,
Yeah.
right?
Speaking of, did Shaylin get replaced, or do we have a replacement appointed?
I expected Shaylin to be here.
I'm
tonight.
not aware of a replacement,
Okay.
so.
I'm not sure, she must have had some.
I think she mentioned she was gonna be gone from this meeting.
Did she?
I thought at the end of the other, I don't know.
She replied to the email about meeting in person, about
Yeah.
Anyway,
Did you-
Said,
meeting in
But
person.
so that's your agenda.
can,
Okay.
can you give us an update on what happened with the Summerwood?
Summer Hill.
Summer
Summer Hill.
Sorry.
It's a different kind of summer.
Yeah, Summer Hill was scheduled for a appeal hearing that has been delayed. And their city is now hiring an outside attorney to represent the board. Me and Lisa will drop to the level, well, I was always at the level. Lisa has to come down to the bottom of the barrel place to join me with the defense of the planning commission's decision, and they're under the process of scheduling that now.
Yeah, we've retained outside counsel, so it's often been recommended that the city attorney, you know, I've represented the planning commission, and is there some conflict in, you know, now representing the body that's going to be reviewing that? And so typically, on controversial appeals, we will hire outside counsel. Since this was just preliminary plat, I was going to try and handle it myself, but it got a little political, and so we just, I think as staff, we're gonna stay out of it and hire outside counsel.
So when is that gonna happen?
Is this over the easement issue essentially?
Yes.
Access, yeah.
What's their,
So-
do you know what their position is? Have they established that?
In the appeal, or whose position?
Who appealed?
the neighbors.
Joining landowner.
Wait, the adjoining land or Symphony or?
The adjoining landowner is challenging our preliminary plat decision approval?
Well, they're just saying that our ordinances are mandatory that that easement be shown on the preliminary plat rather than a condition of approval.
Okay.
And so,
All
anyway,
right.
staff's position is, we think we can condition it, worst case scenario, remand it, put it on the preliminary plat, but it doesn't mean it will be on the final plat, because there's a different ordinance for final. But
They just didn't like the fact that it wasn't showing up on the preliminary plat, or they, not that they didn't like it, they completely disagreed with the fact that if it's on title, it should have shown on preliminary plat.
yeah, 'cause, I mean, our ordinance says it should be
Yeah,
there.
it does.
And so our argument is, we conditioned it, we recognize that, but they want it on there, so.
Okay. And when is that gonna be, do you know?
We're hoping in the next few weeks. I mean, we're having a scheduling conference with all the attorneys, hopefully on Friday.
Okay.
That's
Cool.
the fun. We don't get too many appeals in Centerville. I sometimes think that's really good, and then when we get appeal, I feel terrible because I think
had-
we did something wrong.
We had to reappoint 2 Board of Adjustment members whose terms had expired. So, yeah.
Okay, perfect. Thanks, Corey. All right, let's move along now to the last item on our agenda. We got some meeting minutes to review from our last meeting. Another 2-pager, which is awesome. Love it. Does anybody have anything to recommend for item number 1, or page number 1? Any changes? Page 2? Great. Anyone like to make a motion?
Motion to approve minutes, dated May 26, I guess, 2021. Unamended, thank you.
Second.
Thanks. We have a motion and a second. We'll do this one all together. All those in favor of adopting the minutes, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, that's great, perfect. And I will make a motion to adjourn our meeting.
Second.
All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? No. We are